Bet on Bears fans, day 2 of free agency is here, and we've done nothing. At least to this point that we're recording the podcast. Hopefully by the time this episode drops, you will also be getting a breaking news video from us. But we got to talk about some of the moves that we did make with insider Courtney Cronin on the beat, always keeping us up to date with everything Chicago Bears related. We got to talk about the Justin Fields locations continuing to dwindle. Some people thought Minnesota maybe could have been an option. I don't think that was ever an option, but is that now off the table with them going and getting a quarterback? Maybe. I don't know. Raiders still in play. There's a lot to look at there. Also, got to look at the signings that the Bears have made and how we think that can impact them moving forward. And as yesterday, I will be updating Twitter just about every other minute. So if you see me kind of just looking away, that's what I'm doing because I have a problem. Like, we all understand it. How are you, Courtney? What's going on?
I'm good. I've got my phone like positioned upright because I can, when it's got the eye thing. So when I look at it, it'll scroll up the tweets from my lock screen. So I'm with you. I'm, constantly paranoid during this time of the year. Like, the funniest thing is that you can't really do much during free agency because there's always something that goes on. So whether you're going to the grocery store, whether you're going to drive somewhere, to run errands, you always have to stay connected. I've had many, I remember like in Minnesota several times pulling over on the side of the road, like on the highway to file free agency news when it happened. So hopefully it doesn't happen. I'm at home right now. And, it is odd that nothing has happened today, at least on Tuesday, up to the point we're recording this. But if this follows the MO of Ryan Poles, who is somebody who he's made splashes before, certainly with Montez Sweat, with DJ Moore, but in free agency, overpaying for guys or getting the biggest deal out there, like a Christian Wilkins deal, or what we've seen for some of these other the offensive linemen, like the guards, God, like it's a good time to be an interior offensive lineman and get paid. I guess I'm not too surprised that they haven't been just like shedding dollars left and right on the positions that we think that they would, considering the way that they've handled free agency, not necessarily the first year because of how the roster was set up that year to get them the first pick, but like the way they did last year where they really hit the second wave hard.
I think let's start here with, of course, we want to talk about the free agents that either aren't here or will be here, hopefully, and that have been signed. But there's one move of the offseason that seems to be holding up in everybody's mind, and that has been where Justin Fields is going to end up. I think that this is very interesting because anytime in free agency, when you get the war of reports between Rappaport and Shefty, that is my favorite time. I'm not going to lie, because it's just like, oh, the big dogs are going to war. Here we go. Everybody stand back and see what's going to happen. So yesterday we hear Ian Rappaport say, I believe it was on NFL Network, that the Chicago Bears are not actively shopping Justin Fields, but they are taking calls on Justin Fields. And today we hear from Adam Schefter that teams just weren't interested in Adam Fields, but not that the Bears weren't shopping him. Mm-hmm. So where are we kind of at with all of this? Give us some middle ground here, because of course the truth will end up lying somewhere in the middle.
Like the message the league is sending, and I know the report that came out yesterday, it really wasn't a report. It was just more like, that they're not actively like calling teams being like, hey, we want to move Fields, because if you want to control the leverage, which they didn't have a whole ton to begin with, because, and I don't fault Ryan Poles for this, the way he talked about Justin Fields and exploring the idea of potentially, it's why every tweet I have says potential in it when it comes to Justin Fields, because they've never said we are trying to trade him, but they left the door open. They didn't say, if they were going to keep Justin Fields on the roster, if there was no chance in hell that they were going to move him, they would say, we're not doing it. Point blank, simple, like we're not trying to trade him. But because Ryan Poles left the door open at the combine 2 weeks ago, and the way that he talked about it, trying to get something done ideally before free agency, wanting to, quote, do right by Justin Fields and not have him live in the, quote, gray, that in a way hurts their leverage, because it reflects the thinking around 31 other teams of, we think the Bears are going to do this. How can we play that to our advantage so we don't overpay, or we don't get involved in something that, if you wait it out a little bit longer, it might be more advantageous to the team trying to inherit Justin Fields. What we have learned, though, over the last, I'd say 24 hours, because more than Kirk Cousins, more than Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
And signing their respective deals, Atlanta wanting to go with the best free agent quarterback on the market in Cousins, and they had money to spend. They guaranteed him over $100 million on that 180 deal, and that tells you what they think about Kirk Cousins. What the league told us yesterday by their actions was seeing Jacoby Brissett come off the board, Sam Darnold go to Minnesota late last night to replace Kirk Cousins, at least for right now, until they draft somebody, which I'm convinced they're going to do. And then Gardner Minshew, the $25 million deal to be a bridge quarterback with Las Vegas. They're telling us through their actions that we don't think Justin Fields is a starter. And you can agree with that or you can not agree with that, but once Mac Jones was traded over the weekend for a 6th-round pick, all teams had to do was give up a 5th or a 6th for Justin, and you've got him on the hook for $2.7 million this season, because that would tell you they believe he's a backup. They're not necessarily clamoring to pick up the 5th-year option, so it's a very inexpensive option for a backup. And I think that might be the route that if the Bears, just depends on their timeline. If they want to do this right now, if they want to truly do right by Justin Fields, not have him come here for OTAs, be living in limbo, maybe hopefully not face a trade request coming in from the quarterback, because who knows? We haven't gotten to that point. But if you're Justin Fields looking around like, Jesus, are you serious right now? Like, nobody thinks I can be a starter. I don't want to be here when they're drafting Caleb Williams. Let me go on and get my fresh start.
Yeah.
The Bears have to carefully navigate this to make sure that they don't deal with a contentious situation that could, effectively hurt their trade value even more. But what we know is that the market's really dry for Justin Fields, and people I've spoken with around the league intimate that the Bears may have overplayed their hand with it initially and expected more. I mean, the thought that they were trying to get a 2, that ship has sailed. Now I think there's 2 paths you can take here. Either get what you can right now for Justin Fields, let him do right by him, have him go live on his life somewhere else and get a fresh start, maybe as a backup, or somebody like with the Giants, a chance to get a lot of offseason reps where there are injured quarterbacks who aren't coming back right now, and maybe that puts him in position to be a starter. Or you decide you want to play a little bit of a longer game here and keep him on the roster until somebody, inevitably, a starter on another team, goes down.
Now, that's an interesting scenario there, keeping him on the roster, because you would assume that there's going to be some kind of Caleb versus Justin situation that rises up, like it hasn't already happened, that would now make its way onto the team. And what I've said on this that I find interesting is, if you go the keep Justin on the roster route, you would assume that you're starting things off with Justin Fields still being the starter because he's the veteran, with an opportunity to absolutely lose that job because now Caleb Williams is Ryan Poles' guy. But what if in that process, Justin Fields becomes the guy that we think he is? Does that have you lose value on Caleb because you took him and now he's the backup that couldn't be Justin? Does that, right? Or is it the flip side where your value gets worse on Justin because now everybody sees that a rookie was able to come in and beat them? How does that work out as far as the values moving forward?
I don't ever think it's a bad thing to let a young quarterback learn how to be a pro. So often teams are not in that situation where they can afford that guy time, because they're expected, if you're drafting number 1 overall, and if you're taking a quarterback the way that the Panthers did last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Trevor Lawrence where they did. You're expecting that guy to pan out to be your starter because you don't have that many bites of the apple eating up that high on the food chain at the number 1 pick. You shouldn't, because if you do, you're a bad team and you don't want to be in that spot. But if they have to play this thing out, to your scenario, how does that affect Caleb Williams? If all of a sudden Justin, if it clicks in year 4, it's not a bad thing by any stretch.
It's a great situation to be in.
It's almost like the excessive riches, the wealth you'd have there with a quarterback that panned out that you gave a chance to, or somebody who, and somebody like Caleb Williams that, is a high end backup that will eventually take on, a starter's position, whether it's with the Bears or somewhere else. I don't think they're we're not at that point to even project that out, but it is
Right.
something to consider if they have to go the route of keeping Justin Fields. Like, in an ideal world, if they do that, and you can read all that you want into all of the Vegas odds about, oh, he's now projected to go to this team, his best odds are to stay with the Bears. There's no harm, in theory, there's no harm in going about this, waiting through training camp and getting Justin Fields like a new home when somebody gets hurt. I mean, God, how many 4 plays into Aaron Rodgers' Jets career that he went down? Like, there's always it's a 100% injury rate in the sport. There will always be somebody. And if Ryan Poles doesn't want to just give Justin Fields away for a late day 3 pick, if he's thinking more about the franchise than the player, because you got to put yourself in Justin Fields' shoes. I'm sure that he doesn't want to be just sitting around waiting, knowing that his job is about to be taken over in the short term and potentially obviously the long term, but potentially the short term. And just, let me go start my career fresh. If Ryan Poles is going to match what he said at the combine, it's to move this thing along quickly just to give both parties a fresh start. But if you're thinking economically, the best chance that this team would have would be to wait till training camp. I brought this up when we were writing about the Kirk Cousins thing yesterday and what happened when he went to Atlanta that did not become a destination for Justin Fields, or that took the destination away. The best case scenario is to play this the way that Philly did, coincidentally, with Minnesota back in 2016. So that was the year they used the top pick in the draft on Carson Wentz. They had Sam Bradford, who had been there for a couple years, on the roster. Teddy Bridgewater goes down at the end of the preseason with a horrific knee injury. And Minnesota, because they need a starting quarterback for the season, they have to trade a 1st and a 4th round pick to Philly to get Sam Bradford. Now, I know that was 8 years ago at this point. The logic there, though, is timeless, because that's leverage. That's, realizing the opportunity cost of having a scarce resource at a time when teams may need it, especially if there's injuries. But that's not accounting for all of the other things that sometimes I think we just forget to talk about: egos, politics, culture in the locker room. When you're building towards something, and Ryan Poles talks about the infrastructure that they have in Chicago, what's the risk? We don't know the risk. The team will know the risk. But what is the risk of keeping Justin Fields, the beloved starting quarterback, incumbent quarterback of this team, keeping him on the roster and then bringing the new guy in and making sure that he is developing, making sure that he is being incorporated into this locker room? Whose locker room is it? Like, we're dealing with a bunch of alphas on any football team. How the Bears want to go about that is a very tricky thing to navigate. I don't envy anybody if that's the route that they have to go, because you're taking a gamble that it's all going to work out, that no one's feelings are going to be hurt, that there's not going to be any sort of friction. And that's a gamble that's a pretty big one that, honestly, I don't know if a lot of teams would be able to handle.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a risk. The only reason that I would think that, you maybe do that is just because of the situation that the Bears have been in. I mean, since the 50s, realistically, right? Like, the biggest conversation, the reason that Ryan Poles is moving slow on this is not because he doesn't believe in Justin Fields. One, the market is going away, but I think the market is going away more so because of I have to trade what you want, a higher asset, right? Bears want a 2 or 3 or 4 somewhere in there versus a 5 or a 6. And I also have to pay this guy on maybe he's going to finally get everything to click and we're going to be able to get the most out of him, versus if he was just a free agent, right? I just got to pay him money. I can pick him up.
Well, they technically don't have to. Like, receiving teams now, because of the way that the landscape has shaken out the last 24 hours, they don't have to pick up that 5th-year option. They really don't. Like, of course,
if you're giving away the capital, you would think you would, though.
But they're probably not getting a 2 or a 3 for him. Like, but if you're going the Mac Jones route, 5th, 6th round pick, he's $2.7 million this year. Like, if he balls out, that's great. Then you pay him next year. It's more expensive, but it's a low risk gamble for teams right now that could view him as a backup. So I think we need to start shifting our focus towards places where quarterbacks, like current quarterbacks, like, whose skill set does he mirror best? I said this yesterday on radio. I think Jalen Hurts in Philly, if you want a good backup for him, remember, Marcus Mariota just signed in Washington. I don't know who else their backup is on their roster. That could be an option. Maybe Baltimore. Like, think of it logically for like where he could go and mirror the quarterback who's currently playing in their skill set the best. On top of that, there's also the injury quarterback situation. So the Giants, Daniel Jones coming off the ACL tear, like let's see how that plays out. And if Justin goes there, he gets a lot of reps in the offseason, maybe he has a chance to compete. Indianapolis, the same thing with Anthony Richardson. I think there's a lot there to like about the options that still remain. It's a soft market. It's a dried up market, but that doesn't mean that there are zero options for the Bears within all of this. They just have to choose the path that they want to go down, which may come at the cost of getting what they initially thought they were going to for him.
Right. But do we think, I think that's the tough part, right? Is Ryan Poles willing to take that much of a loss? I think probably coming into this, he thought a fourth was taking a loss on Justin Fields.
Sure.
And now it seems that the NFL is saying, we'll give you a fifth or a sixth at best for Justin Fields. Is he willing to take that level of a loss on what he views as a good asset for the Chicago Bears, but in a year where draft capital is dwindling, especially when you make the trade for Ryan Bates?
I'm trying to pull up the quote that we heard from him at the combine about Justin Fields. Let me find it. He said when we asked him the motivation to trade Justin before free agency, he said, quote, "It just depends on what opportunities pop up. I will say this. I think you guys know me well enough. If we go down that road, I want to do right by Justin as well. Skipping along here, we're going to gather information. We will move as quickly as possible. We are not going to be in a rush in what presents itself and what's best for the organization." So by that logic, if you're taking those words at face value, Ryan Poles isn't going to do something that's going to feel like a loss to the organization. Sometimes life and reality, which it very clearly has, and the perception of Justin Fields, not as an NFL starter. That's what other teams are telling us right now, or even as a bridge quarterback, at the cost of what is currently out there for the Bears and what is being fielded, which I've reported this, others have reported it. Like the second round pick was the goal. Sometimes you have to alter your goals. It's not necessarily moving the goalpost, but it's altering based on what the market is telling you and how quickly things have moved with quarterback movement around the league and free agency.
Yeah, it's definitely been, I mean, like you talk about free agency opening and on day one, all the quarterbacks are in place. I mean, we saw Gardner Minshew get a deal. Like shout out to him.
And a really good deal for him too.
Yeah, really good deal. I mean, like an opportunity to go compete. There was reports that the Raiders may have been still interested in Justin.
That lasted very like two nanoseconds. Like
that was the weirdest thing ever. Like, why is Luke Getsy running this back? Why is he like, no, we got to get him back? I know the last 3 years.
I saw that report from The Athletic, and like the wording was they're kicking the tires, which just means that they're feeling it out. It could be a leverage play. It could just be a way to maybe drive down the price. Who knows for Gardner Minshew and his agent? Like, oh, we're gonna still keep our options open on Justin Fields, and then lo and behold, like 2 minutes later, you see the news break about Gardner Minshew going there on a 2-year, $25 million deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, smoke screens, leverage plays, trying to, navigate the market and work things in a cost-effective manner for the team that happen, which leads you to believe that some of that stuff might not have actually had real legs to it, which I don't believe the Raiders thing did.
And it was the fact that they were still like, what were they like plus 600 last we checked to actually land Justin? Like, I don't know, man. Like that was probably the wildest part of this entire Justin Fields saga, where it was like the Bears, Atlanta, the Steelers, the Raiders. Wait, what?
And they were in the mix for like, they've been on everybody's like short list of odds. Not that like that is the gospel or anything, but it is interesting where Vegas is hearing that stuff from, not the Vegas Raiders, but like Vegas in general in the betting market, because to have his odds, that like the fourth best odds going to a place where they show like the Raiders' actions show you that they believe that Justin Fields was the issue in Chicago, not Luke Getsy, because they hired him as their offensive coordinator. And I think that stuff matters when you're pulling this whole thing into context, thinking about the places that would actually make sense for Justin.
Yeah, we'll see what it ends up being. We'll be monitoring this situation the entire time. I mean, Justin Fields' saga continues, and it may continue into the season, into training camp. Who knows where this is going to end up finishing out. Just a quick note, Falcons did sign wide receiver Darnell Mooney to a 3-year, $39 million deal. A little bit, I don't know about that one. Little overpay. Seems a little
That's a lot.
strong to me.
Well, again, does a move like that signal to you what they believe? And Ryan Pace is down there. He's working in their front office. So there is that tie. He drafted Darnell Mooney in the 4th or 5th round. I forget which one it was. And then, clearly he sees the issue here might have been the quarterback. And we've debated this for a long time. We don't need to go back into it, but for him to get a deal like that, a solid 3-year deal, there's $24 million guaranteed on that. Good for Mooney. Good for him to go get his fresh start, try to get back to being the receiver that you were in your second year. To hit 1,000 yards your second year playing with multiple different quarterbacks, he's clearly a talented guy and he's a good number 2. He doesn't need to be a number 1. Not in that offense, definitely.
Right.
And it's the Falcons doing right. They see a window right now to go win the NFC South. They just signed Kirk Cousins to a massive deal. They've got a really good defense. They have Drake London. They've got Kyle Pitts. They've got Bijan Robinson. And now it's adding those extra pieces, the complementary elements to the offense that are going to help Kirk Cousins and this team in its quest to go win the division.
Yeah, well, the Falcons are going to be an interesting team to watch this year because they are.
For sure.
I mean, listen, when does Kirk Cousins put the grill on? That's the real question. When's he break out the grill? When are the chains coming? Quavo's already said he's icing out Kirk as soon as he hits the city. So when Quavo's got vouching for you, I mean, listen. Let's keep this thing moving along, though. Some other things that happened yesterday. Some of the small things that happened yesterday. I guess not small. It's a big deal. 3 years, $24 million deal to DeAndre Swift, 25 years old, coming off his best rushing season with the Eagles. Played really well last year. Basically a 2-year deal, I'd say, with the $15 million in guarantees. Do you feel like this was the right move for the Bears to make at the running back positions with some of the other deals that we saw out there around the NFC, right? I mean, you get Josh Jacobs going to the Packers, Vikings picking up Aaron Jones today after they let him go. There's some good backs that were out there for similar money that maybe the Bears could have gone after.
I think people were surprised that it happened when it did. That was within the opening minutes of the negotiating window. They announced, it comes out that DeAndre Swift is going to go to the Bears, and the deal, 3 years, $24 million, over 15 guaranteed. I don't think it's terrible by any stretch. I mean, because they still have a lot of salary cap space. They still have the ability to account for more additions to this roster. And I think they will. They certainly need to. But they, for DeAndre Swift, I just kind of wonder what the role is going to be for him, because he goes, they saw him up close in Detroit. They clearly saw something that they really liked. He gets traded during the draft on day 3, I believe it was, last year to Philly. He goes and has a career year. He makes the Pro Bowl, 1,000 yards rushing, 4.6 yards per carry. He's a high ceiling guy. And at his age, it's not a bad move for Chicago when we know this is a team that very well could have a young quarterback. So what's the best way to help a young quarterback? Run support, getting somebody in there who can take the load off of a Caleb Williams potentially. And in addition to that, Shane Waldron, Chicago's a running back by committee place. It has been, and doesn't mean that does not mean anything that's going to negatively impact Roschon Johnson. I think this is more of a telltale sign of how they feel about Khalil Herbert, his availability, his ability in pass protection, being more of a complete back. And now what you get with somebody who's also a really good pass catching back in DeAndre Swift, it just helps complement your room. But I will say, with Shane Waldron in Seattle, Kenneth Walker was very clearly the bell cow, and then Zach Charbonnet behind him is a two-man backfield. How, now that you have 3 and somebody that they spent a very high draft pick on, considerably, a 4th-round pick for Roschon Johnson when they traded up to get him, how does this whole thing shake out? Is Khalil Herbert the odd man out? I mean, he's going into year 4. I think that very clearly signifies that they're going to be ready at some point to move on. But I don't fault the Bears for getting involved in the running back market when they did, because I don't think anybody, at least us, we think, running backs are devalued, the market is going to be suppressed this year. Sure wasn't yesterday. All the running backs got paid. Josh Jacobs got paid. Tony Pollard got paid. Saquon Barkley got paid.
Saquon Barkley got the bag.
And good for him. The fact that the Giants didn't even offer him a deal, I think, is a little suspect. I do get it. They didn't want to overpay at that position, but when Daniel Jones was at his best, it was because Saquon Barkley was on the field with him. That's neither here nor there. That's a different team. But the Bears didn't have to pay that amount to get somebody that they believe can have that same sort of impact on whoever's playing quarterback, particularly if he's a young quarterback.
I think the only concern for me, the reason I may have leaned Jacobs over anything was coming out of college a little bit more versatile. They didn't use him well in Vegas at all, but a lot more versatile as a pass catcher and a runner. Saquon, I kind of felt the same way with. The one knock on, not to say that Shane Waldron didn't run the football at all out in Seattle,
they
but it was
to run a little bit
underutilized.
more. Yeah, they definitely. I think Pete Carroll, with some of those subtle comments that he made last season, really would have emphasized running the ball more if he was calling the plays. And that's something that I think Shane Waldron's going to have to take into account here while trying to get the passing game on par with what Matt Eberflus wants, because there's no issue like for the Bears being another top rushing offense. It's just the gap between being a top rushing offense and a top passing offense that needs to close. Like, I don't have any doubt that whoever you would bring in, like, that was going to be what you lean on. I mean, depends what whose quarterback skill set you're using. If it's Justin Fields, you know that his legs
you're still running the ball.
Yeah, you're still running the ball. It's still a big asset, but think about where DeAndre Swift came from. All those short yardage situations were mostly Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
So it gives you an element of the run game. Like, it provides another cushion in the run game, and somebody who I would anticipate coming in and, immediately being the quote unquote bell cow, but how they divvy up responsibilities, short yardage, third downs, goal line situations, who's their best pass protecting back. I mean, last year it was Roschon Johnson, and now, okay, like, what do those roles become? But it's definitely, I can understand why people are looking at this saying, well, spend all that money on a running back. What about the offensive line? What about the center? Well, today is Oregon's Pro Day, and they've got 8 representatives, including Matt Eberflus, Shane Waldron. I would imagine Chris Morgan's out there because they're not only like doing their due diligence. I mean, you're not going to just turn away if Bo Nix is throwing the ball and be like, oh, sorry, we don't need it. We're probably getting Caleb Williams, but you get to do your due diligence on all the top quarterbacks, and you get to take a look at the best interior offensive lineman in the draft in Jackson Powers Johnson, who, if they want to trade back from 9, you and I talked with Jordan Reed about that scenario a couple weeks ago. That could very well be in play for the Bears.
Yeah, that's one that I think makes things a lot more interesting, because very much like the Philly situation, right? We're asking the same question here. Who's our center? The first thing we went out and paid was a running back. Now in Philly, it's different, right? Because a Hall of Fame center retires after a great year, Super Bowls, things like that. But you're here in Chicago and you're like, okay, I didn't want the Bears to go out and get a free agent center. I wasn't that guy. I figured
expensive this year. My God,
they're expensive, and they're usually on the market for a reason. Connor Williams is probably the best name that was out there. And I mean, coming off an ACL. I mean, like those are things where it's like, those guys are big. They usually don't get more healthy after injuries happen. And I am tired of us paying guys who have been injured, and then we're surprised when they get here and we're like, man, he missed 7 weeks. How'd that happen? So I feel like the fact that seeing them prioritize this in the draft, seeing them make this something that is, they're sending that many guys down to evaluate Jackson Powers Johnson. I guess let's do our Road to the Draft, brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. Our question, if you're on the clock right now, has the Bears draft priorities changed outside of the quarterback position? Of course, we know Caleb Williams seems to be the number 1, but it really felt like 9. A lot of people were feeling Bears go wide receiver, Bears go wide receiver. You got to get another weapon opposite DJ Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Now it seems like maybe they're focusing in on taking possibly a later in the first round type of guy that can help the offensive line.
It would be a good investment. And I know that certain people are like, you should never draft a guard that high. Like, who knows? I mean, I don't think he would go at 9. I think that would probably be a situation where Ryan Poles is looking at that saying, let's move back a couple spots, get the other team's first rounder, pick up another pick. Maybe they can recoup a second. Who knows? But at the time being, they haven't signed a defensive lineman. So could 9 be a spot for them to go get? Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, sure. Atlanta just signed Darnell Mooney. Are they going to go take another receiver at 8? Maybe that means a receiver falls to the Bears at 9. Maybe it is Malik Neighbors. Maybe it is Roma Dunze, another option for them. But Troy Franklin, who's somebody else they're getting a chance to look at today at the Oregon Pro Day. He broke onto the scene in 2022, and then last year had an awesome season, a focal point of their offense. Almost 1,400 yards, 81 catches, 14 touchdowns, deep threat for this team, 17 yards per catch. Like, those are all options for the Bears that I think are in play. I mean, Franklin would probably be a second-round pick, but we don't have one right now. So
little light, about 187 right now.
Yeah, to be in that position where you have options for what you're going to do, I don't think that's a bad thing. But again, free agency is going to tell us what they do the next couple of days and even into the second wave, what their draft priorities are going to be. If you're going to get Caleb Williams in here, you want to pair him with a center that is on the same growth trajectory, the same learning curve as him. And I don't think it would hurt for them to wait until the 20s, maybe the late teens, to go get Jackson Powers Johnson, knowing how many resources they're putting into today's pro day. It doesn't mean that every pro day, like if they send 8 people, are going to, means like, oh my God, they're absolutely locked in on this one prospect. But it is
their due diligence.
It is a curious sign. And we know how this team has done with the private workouts. Saw it last year with Darnell Wright. They dedicated tremendous time in learning this player, and Chris Morgan very clearly now with the promotion from offensive line coach combined with run game coordinator, like he's going to have a lot of say in what they do with that second round pick if they decide that they want to go offensive line. So getting your homework done on that player is the best way to know, okay, is this the right pick for us? And also, like, all right, well, if we think we're going to be locked in here, and I know they'd have to trade probably out of that pick, so there's no guarantee, but how can you does that free up your mindset for what you want to do in free agency at other positions? Because it should.
I think that the part that maybe intrigues is that now as well, you take the Justin Fields situation into it. Going into this, it felt like you're probably getting a second, maybe a third, but you're getting some kind of higher draft capital. Now with that being lower, that gap between that 9th pick and the Bears' next selection is pretty wide.
75,
you may need to,
right? That's like a lot.
You may need to trade back just to try and get some of that a day 2 draft capital in there as well, so that you can still be able to utilize pieces in the draft, build onto this team, and get some of the guys you like. I'm not gonna lie, when we had Brandon Thorne on, of course, we do research on all the guests. If I don't know him beforehand, I watched some of his stuff at Trench Warfare, and he had Jackson Powers Johnson on, and hearing him talk, the second he talked, I was like, he's a Ryan Poles guy, because you just see him like, he's breaking down the plays that he needed to make and how he's going through it, and he's very smart. And then there's some plays where it's like, well, what happened here? I lost my guy, and I knew I had to hit somebody, so I just laid the dude out in front of me, and it opened things up for a tackle or opened things up for a touchdown. It's just like, this is exactly the type of guy that Ryan Poles has kind of prioritized in the draft. You see he loves Tevin Jenkins as he's here. Tevin's that kind of guy.
Sure.
Darnell Wright last year, he's talked about Darnell as being the prick that the Bears need. That's the kind of guy that he like. And I think Jackson Powers fits that exact same mold. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears were thinking offensive line. And here's the thing, I get it. I hear Yurko say it. I hear a lot of people say it. You don't take centers in the first round. Why would you ever take a first round center? It doesn't make sense. It makes sense if he's the guy that's going to sit in there and snap the football and bring stability for 10 years. That's when it makes sense.
Of course. I mean, especially when they don't have somebody like that on the roster. Yes, I know they traded for Ryan Bates, but the idea of playing somebody, out of position potentially, like the experience he has at center, like pales in comparison to his experience at guard. Do you want to go that route? Is that the smartest route to go?
Yeah.
And I think it was Breck Ackley, one of the Bears scouts, was on with Waddle and Sylvie yesterday and talked about that idea of like guys, not playing offensive linemen, like playing them at their natural position.
Yes.
So having depth is always a great thing. But when that trade happened last week, that didn't signify anything to me like, oh, this is their starting guy. It's their starting guy for now until they get somebody else, but there's time for them to do that. And whether they get another, whether they get somebody else in free agency as a somebody to come in and compete during camp, or whether they go and use a high draft pick on a center, they have to correct it. They know that they have to correct it. And that is, I know people say, oh, well, you shouldn't use a high draft pick on that. You should be drafting for best player available instead of drafting for need. Sometimes the need and best player available at certain draft spots is the same. And that's okay if the Bears, in my opinion, that's okay if the Bears go that way.
Yeah, we got to hear from Breck yesterday at kind of the ESPN Bears powwow that we all had as a get together. Got to hear from Kevin Warren as well. And there was a couple things he said that stood out to me, and it was, I literally wrote down in my notes. He said you can't just take guards and throw them in there at center, which I found hilarious because it's literally what the Bears have done
Yeah,
for the
that
past
is.
5 years, and that to me screamed the 5th round pick you traded is for a depth guard piece, probably not for your starting center by
Sure.
bringing in Ryan Bates, which I'm fine with. I don't want to see him do that anyway. You need guard depth. You got guard depth. But he said that the biggest issue from college centers is that they're moving so fast that their responsibility isn't as much. More times than not, at least how things were done before. He doesn't know if this is how Shane will do them, but that the center is setting your protection. The center is talking to the offensive lineman and getting them ready to go. He's the one that's making the calls. And then, of course, the quarterback has the almighty say to get you into something different if he sees something different. That to me, and how he talked about going out to college and making sure these guys, like at Oregon, that play really fast, can do that, have done that, what have been their responsibilities. As much as we love Jackson Powers Johnson, I do wonder how much responsibility he had in college, because Oregon is one of those offenses that's like, we're going to get down, we're going to move down the field really quickly, and we're not going to give the defense a chance to get set. So something interesting to keep out for, but a lot of good stuff from him yesterday.
Yeah, and with the spread concepts in college to how, offensive linemen are smaller, the defensive linemen that they're, going head up with are smaller, how that translates to his fit, his size in this offense. Ryan Poles wants, all the athletic traits are the really, like, that's, as we're looking like how this team's going to fill out this roster, athletic traits are huge, long, lean, and fast. They say that about every position. Same thing with, they want an offensive lineman that can move in a zone scheme. And Jackson Powers Johnson may very well be their best option for that. Yeah. But, there's a lot when you're talking about the communication. You have to know the call. You have to communicate it to 4 other people on the offensive line. You have to set the protections. You have to change the protections. I saw this with Garrett Bradbury in Minnesota when the Vikings, I think, drafted him 18th overall in 2019.
Yeah.
And he was undersized. It was not, he certainly developed into a much better offensive lineman in the Kevin O'Connell offense versus what he was in the first couple of years of his career. But that's a really important thing to consider, that there's going to be a growing curve for that center, whoever it is, and not expecting that they're going to come in right away and look like Jason Kelce. I don't think anybody is, but like, that's just, I need to throw that out there because it's an incredibly difficult position with all the things that you're responsible for that you might not have had to the same degree in college.
Yeah, and that's why, like, even the move to go get Bates, why I don't want him to be our starting center, it starts you off with less pressure, though, right? He's somebody who, at a minimum, we know can snap the football and it gets
It's a
to the
good
quarterback.
contingency plan.
Yeah, I mean, and it allows you to kind of bring a rookie in slowly. I would have preferred somebody that actually maybe played a ton of center in the NFL, but I mean, like, I'm not mad at any of them. And to me, the fact that the Bears are looking at that, that Ryan Poles' MO is to go out there and try and add as much draft capital. He's been able to do it in 2 drafts now, and I would expect the same here. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a move for an offensive lineman, and I wouldn't be upset if we saw it in the first round of the draft. Like, we were all upset that when the Bears took Darnell Wright last year, and how can you take a right tackle that high? Well, when he was protecting the right side of the line like an absolute monster last year, I didn't hear a lot of complaining. So I want the Bears to do their evaluations, but you also got to be able to make you got to be able to take risks on guys if you know that they are what everyone expects them to be.
Sure.
And that's what this draft is. There's a lot of risk in here. I'll ask you this, Courtney, before we get up out of here. From the moves you've seen so far, what has been the most surprising move and what has been the best move that you've seen?
Surprising. That's a good question.
NFL overall. Doesn't have to be just the Bears because we haven't made much.
I would say, kind of the flip-flopping of we all expected the running back market to be suppressed, but the safety market kind of is taking on the MO of the running back market lately. And Justin Simmons hasn't signed anywhere. Jordan Poyer hasn't signed anywhere. Quadre Diggs hasn't signed anywhere. Jamal Adams, like so on and so forth. The Bears got a nice jump on that on Sunday when they snagged Kevin Byard before he was going to go on another free agent visit. I think that was what was reported. It's a guy that Flus knows well from his time in the AFC South. I think that going into this year with your secondary solidified, it's going to help Jaquan Brisker. It's going to help the rest of that unit pick up where they left off with, tied for the lead with 22 interceptions last year. But the rest of the guys that are sitting out there, what are they going to go for? Like Justin Simmons is a Pro Bowler, like perennial Pro Bowler. He's been in the league for 8 years. I know that we devalue that position, but I didn't think we devalued it that much. That's probably my biggest surprise so far outside of, and I don't really know if it's much of a surprise, but the wide receiver market is just like, ugh, yuck. Like
once you started tagging guys, though, I kind of
knew that was going to happen. But Michael Pittman got a good deal. I think that was Gabe Davis was somebody that, the deal that he got. I think Chicago could have paid for that, but they're clearly sticking to their principles about what they feel the value is, and the next best, if Calvin Ridley does indeed end up going to the Patriots, maybe it is Marquise Brown. I don't know. I don't know if you want to tap into somebody that's the injury history like that over the course of his career. Didn't play a lot last year in Arizona. Who knows? But those are probably my biggest surprises. And then the best moves. I mean, God, I got to give Kirk Cousins credit. $230 million in earnings before signing this next contract. The guy's coming off a ruptured Achilles that happened halfway through the season last year. And he just signs a $100 million contract.
Yes.
Bravo. 36 years old, probably the last big deal he's going to get. And he took no qualms saying, all right, Minnesota, I'm not taking a team-friendly contract. I know my worth, and I'm going to move on. And I'll say this about Minnesota. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're screwed now because, Sam Darnold's a bridge quarterback. Can they really get up from 11 to 2 or 3? They're prepared to do that from what I'm hearing. But see all the players that they've signed? There's some really good players in there. I think that the Aaron Jones signing, they released Alexander Madison in the offseason. Jones is 29. Who knows how many more years he'll, be a high value, non-injury prone running back because he is coming off injury. But I think that they've made some salient moves. So obviously we're all going to be watching to see what they do at quarterback, but I don't think it was as disastrous as everybody was making it out to be yesterday when they saw Kirk Cousins walk out the door.
It was yesterday's, first off, I said this yesterday on the pod. I gave all the numbers that Kirk has made. Most of his contracts have literally been fully guaranteed. Yep. This is the only contract he's had that he gets $150 million, but 100 of it is fully guaranteed. It's the only contract he's had in his career that wasn't 100% fully guaranteed. He's set to make $411 million. I get it, one playoff win. Maybe I don't want to have the guy as my quarterback moving forward, but can I work with Kirk the businessman after he's done in the NFL?
My goodness, the guy he's been so smart with the way that he bet on himself.
And no agent, right? He has
an agent. He's a very good agent.
He's got an agent.
Mike McCartney's his agent from Vayner Sports. He's one of the best in the business at getting these deals done. And I was there, in 18 when he signed the first fully guaranteed contract, the 3 years, $84 million, and then has kind of held the Vikings between a rock and a hard place to get what he's wanted the last couple of years. And then he did the same thing this year. They chose not to. He went out and got his. So you can think what you want about him as a performer, his ability in, getting this team to the playoffs and winning playoff games, a 1-3 playoff record, and you're going to be finishing up your career making about over $400 million. Sign me up for that. And the Vikings are now going to have to decide, Washington played 12 different quarterbacks starting games since 2018 when Kirk left there for good. Is Minnesota going to follow suit and become the next Washington? Because it's hard, to get good, above average to good quarterback play. It's not as easy as you think. We're just the next guy will be better because he'll be cheaper. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So Vikings might have to learn that the hard way.
And they struggled trying to figure it out. They tried to bring a couple of guys in there to be Kirk's eventual replacement.
Yeah, and it never worked out. Never worked out.
Kellen Mond was one of those guys. I thought he was good too. I'm not gonna lie. That's why I don't pick quarterbacks. Watch this tape in college. I was like, there's some upside here. There was not.
No, that was a third round. Just do what you got to do to have somebody there.
I guess so. Yeah, exactly. Hey man, we appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. We're gonna keep you guys updated. Of course, if and when I would hope the Bears do anything, we will have a breaking news video on here as well, and always got the coverage over on ESPN 1000, where you can also hear Courtney Cronin coming in and giving that great insight. So hit that like button, subscribe to the page. For Courtney, it's your boy Pat the Designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down, Ryan. Do something. A little bit. Thanks.